great. Well, welcome everyone. Great to have you here. Today we'll be talking about AI in genealogy and genetic genealogy. And specifically, I'll look at about four use cases or four projects I've been working on where we've used it to good effect. And, there are many different use cases. So I'll give a little bit of background about myself. I retired after 45 years in the global tech industry last year, and I've set up or co-set up a digital health company called Digisapiens. I'm in the IEEE, so my background is engineering and the Irish Society of Human Genetics. I co-founded ISOG Ireland, International Society of Genetic Genealogy, and I'm administrator of Genealogical, director of Genealogical Society of Ireland. I'm on various boards, including Sandyford and Dargan Forum and Dublin, Belfast Smart City Task Force, and doing a number of administrative duties, including genetic genealogy Ireland, DNA outreach, Irish Midlands, Galway, the Sarsfield Homecoming Project, and so I hope this works. Right, so today we look at, and I'll probably go relatively quickly and try and get it done after the half hour so that we can have a Q&A. We look at why does AI matter in genealogy? Well, it can help to transform how we search, interpret, and connect with historical data. It can help us with the digitization, and I've been recently involved in helping with the digitization of Genealogical Society of Ireland records. And it gives us enable faster insights and broader connections for researchers. What I look at is probably from two angles. One is looking at what the main platform companies are doing with AI, and that includes Ancestry and MyHeritage and FTDNA, 23andMe, and so on and so forth, and Family Search. And then on the other side, what are the global platform artificial intelligence companies doing? Currently, as you saw, there was a big take-up in AI with the release of ChatGPT. And ever since, that has probably has the fastest adoption of any technology ever in history. And since then, things are going at quite a rapid pace, particularly with the build-out of the infrastructure necessary for AI. And there's been literally trillions of euros or dollars allocated to the build out of the infrastructure. So it's definitely a major, some people have called it a new industrial revolution, and it's something which is happening very, very quickly. I've been working with about 10 of the large language models. The usual ones like OpenAI and Anthropic and Claude, Google, Gemini, and so on and so forth. And some of the more esoteric ones like DeepSeek and Alibaba and so on.
Okay, thank you. I'm Gerard Corcoran.
Yeah, can you mute? Yeah. So some of the other applications are in the use of optical character recognition and handwriting recognition. So it's very, very good for scanning documents, and that's one of our big preoccupations in the GSI at the moment, because we have quite a large archive and we have very valuable collections such as the Liege papers, which are archives which date from the, it goes back 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries.
Sorry, did you mean to screen share?
Yeah, I think there are 2 people in the waiting room. Shane?
Yeah, well, it's just one person's having an issue with the sound.
Oh yeah, okay. So I'll have a look at a number of use cases and what I've used them for. So in my particular ancestry on my paternal side, they come from 2 main townlands. One of them is Lura in North Tipperary, and the other one is Clonfert across the Shannon River in East Galway. And my father was born in Lura, and his grandfather was born in Clonfert, and they had arrived in Clonfert after the Cromwellian expulsions, the great migration following Cromwell, but they had originated originally in Lura, so they were in Lura for several hundred years, at least going back to the 14th century. And I believe that they were probably in that general area going back over 1,000 years, as the name is derived from the principal saint of that region, who's called Ruan. So I'm very interested in that particular townland, and I wanted to imagine what life would have been like for my ancestors, going back in time, both in the recorded time they were there and the time where I speculate they were probably living in the distant past, based on DNA results and so on and so forth. So the main names were involved in were Corcorans, Hawks, Walshes, Kennedys, and McKeegans. There were also Larkins and Mahans and Mulrooney and O'Rooney and people like that. And the parish lands and the DNA records bring us back to medieval times and probably beyond that. And DNA can bring us back, probably 4,000 years, and the DNA markers we have are consistent with the earliest DNA of that type which arrived in Ireland. And Redwood Castle, which is in Lura, is was a bardic school. The McKeegans were Brehons. And they were guardians of the written knowledge and the genealogy as well as written law. So that's to put it into context. And so what I wanted to imagine was the lives of people and the history of the district. So I started to use GPT-4. And one of the elements of GPT-4 is DALI, which allows you to enter scripts to say, imagine, give all of the detail of the ancestor you have, whether it was McKeegan or Kennedy or Corcoran. This data exists in the written records. So input all of that into the prompt, and it will generate an image based on the historic context, right? So I've been able to do that for the various historic periods of Lura. The earliest known traces of settlement there were in the Mesolithic period, over 5,000 years ago. During the first Neolithic settlers, the arrival of the Bronze Age people 4,000 years ago, the development of Gaelic culture and ring forts, the early arrival of Christianity, the establishment of the first monastic settlements in Lura, the arrival of the Vikings and the disruption which was caused by the Vikings, and that was in the 8th, 9th, and 10th century. The later arrival of the Normans, who built the first wooden bailey fortification in Lura, and they surrounded the village with moats, and so on and so forth. And the coexistence between the Gaelic tribes, which were the Kennedys, the McKeegans, the O'Carrolls, they were the principal tribes at that time, and the Norman settlers, who were effectively the Ormonds, the Butlers, who were headquartered in Kilkenny, but who ruled as far as North Tipperary. And so it was just a question of taking all of the written history I could find, and fortunately we have some very talented local historians in Lura, David Broderick, and they had gone century by century and written down a narrative of what had happened over the main events in the historic record for that townland. So I've taken all of that and put it into image form using GPT-4, and I managed to produce over 100 images, and I'll show an example of those a little bit later. So in this case, the AI tools are helping us to reconstruct and visualize lost worlds. We can use the OCR and the scanning to read text from faded manuscripts. We can do clustering of surnames across time. The specific tool I used was DALI, which is part of GPT-4. And this is based on Ghibli-style rendering. Ghibli was famous Japanese animator who perfected this particular style. It's considered a very advanced style in animation. And it recreates the scenes which would have reflected the history of that town. Okay, and so this is really in helping with storytelling and engaging new generations, and it certainly could be useful for schools to get the local schools interested in their particular history. What motivated me to do this was it was my cousin Bridget Hawk's 80th birthday, and I wanted to do a something for which was specific to her particular childhood or her life. And she had many years ago when I was quite young and she visited our home, she would tell me many stories about when she was taking a shortcut from her home to the national school, walking across fields, seeing the Neolithic and the Iron Age routes. She could see the mass rocks on the field, and so I incorporated many of these stories into the animation. So it is very useful for storytelling. It can blend the genealogical record and the historical record with some artistic empathy, if you like. It's a replicatable model, and I'm not sure if it can be automated, but that's something I'll try at a future date. And probably the next ChatGPT have just released a similar product for video. So I think the next step will be to input all of that data into a video creation system and see if it can create an animated video. So these are examples of the slides, and they show the history of the town. One of them, they did build a big moat, and that was on the edge of the river. After the first monasteries were settled, that moat failed, and it created a lake, which is beside the village now. And there have always been stories about almost a Loch Ness monster in that lake. The local folklore tradition is of a strange creature in the lake, so we've included that in the animation. Okay. So the second case study we have a look at is the Sarsfield Homecoming project. Patrick Sarsfield was the originator of the wild geese. After the siege of Limerick, he was an Irish Jacobite general. He was the hero of the Williamite Wars. Of course, he was up against William the Conqueror, not William the Conqueror, William of Orange, rather. He after the Battle of the Boyne, after the terrible Battle of Aughrim, and finally the Siege of Limerick, which was considered a treaty was signed, and one of the conditions of that treaty was that the Sarsfield and his army, it was quite a large army, migrate to France or leave Ireland forever. Okay. And they moved to France. He served in the army of Louis, or the Louis XV, I think, and he rose. He became I think was a marshal, but a very high rank in the French cavalry. He was mortally wounded at the Battle of Langen, and he died near Huy. And the project here, which is led by the French embassy in Ireland, by Luc Guillon, who is the consul, the special consul for Southwest region for Limerick. And it's a partnership between historians, genealogists, scientists, and different European collaborators. So Patrick Sarsfield, he was the leading Irish soldier in Jacobite Wars, and he and his men fled from Ireland to France, and this exodus is known as Flight of the Wild Geese. And we found that his Y-DNA places Sarsfield lineage within the E haplogroup, which is extremely rare. With our origins way back in time in ancient Egypt, and then probably migrated via Rome, probably with the Roman armies. But we believe it was in the Geraldini dynasty, which many believe was the origin of the Fitzgeralds. It was also some famous people belonged to that dynasty, including famous Mona Lisa. She was a member of the Geraldini family, and they moved up into Friesland in Netherlands, in present-day Netherlands. They joined William the Conqueror. They migrated into England with William the Conqueror, and they were constables of Windsor. They were quite disruptive to Henry II at a later time, and he sent them off to Wales, and he gave them control of Pembrokeshire. and they became constables of Pembroke, and they built one of the largest castles there. And they migrated to Ireland. Now, what we found was that the Sarsfields who we tested had similar DNA to some of the other Cambro-Norman families, including the Fitzgeralds and the Rochos. Roche, some of the other famous Cambro-Norman families. And on the maternal side, they were married into the Binghams, of course, who later became the Lord Lucans, including the famous Lord Lucan, who disappeared. And the Binghams, they were the Lucans, the Lucans of Mayo, who didn't have a very good reputation as landlords in Mayo. And interestingly enough, they were the ancestors of some of the Spencers, including Diana, Princess of Wales. So Prince William, or the future King of England, is in a sense a descendant of Sarsfield. So what is the status of this project now? They have raised the funds to search for remains of Sarsfield. They believe he is in the monastery of Huy, and as of last week, they had discovered the remains of a very large person. They, at the time, the Duke of Warwick, I think, said that Sarsfield was a very, very tall person, over 6 foot, about 6'5", and the remains which they found were consistent with that. They are now in the process of doing the forensic examination, and if it is confirmed, then the remains will be repatriated by the French Navy, as he was a hero also in France, and it will be repatriated to Ireland for a state funeral. But we have to wait for the next phase of the project. The forensic DNA has been done in the Netherlands, and we are still awaiting those. So, how did the AI help us in this? Well, I had to build out the Sarsfield genealogies. We started with relatively small amount of information, but as we built out a tree on the on MyHeritage tree. Le Guillon had done extensive research and had found errors in the previous genealogies. These were corrected. He determined that there were no living male descendants of Patrick Sarsfield, but if we go back up his paternal tree to the Sarsfields of Kilmallock, we were able to find male descendants on that side. So we tested the DNA of these, and they gave us that very rare haplogroup, and it also gave us the fact that it was associated with Cambro-Normans, and yeah, so that's where we are with that. When I started that project over a year ago, we only had a certain number of people on the tree, but the AI smart matching on MyHeritage allowed us to connect in everyone else who was researching those trees, establish lots of very interesting sources, it made the job of doing the research so much easier. So now we have a tree with several hundred names on it, many of them very interesting connections. It goes to King James II, it goes to the Fitzjames dynasties, it goes to the people in Monaco, and so on and so forth. This is a photo of a presentation was given in the University of Limerick by Loic when he presented the project and he launched the GoFundMe campaign. Now, yeah, we've reached a major milestone, and we are hoping that we can get confirmation of the match. If we don't get the same match, we will have to rethink some of the testing strategies. Maybe look at mitochondrial DNA, and maybe look at some alternative strategies. Okay, so the third case study is the Irish Big Y mapping project, and this is based on research by Thibaut Beher. There are over 10,000 Big Y Irish test results analyzed to date. This is on the FTDNA platform. I think the Irish are one of the largest testing cohorts there, along with the Scottish. So that gave us a very good cohort to analyze. And what we've been doing is reconstructing 2,000-year-old pedigrees and identify some of the ancient Tua founders. And if we map that onto an Irish atlas, we can see they are consistent with the ancient genealogical records. As you know, many of our modern genealogies or records were destroyed in the fire of 1922. But we do have a very impressive cohort of ancient DNA, probably some of the most extensive in Europe. These were written down by the monks in medieval times. Some of them are fabricated, some of them are true, but what the DNA allows us to separate the wheat from the chaff, if you like. And for about 100 surnames, we've been able to trace them back to the medieval records and associate them with a specific named individual or a specific named pedigree. And you can see the color relationships are the different large tribal groups, if you like. The orange are the Connachta. I belong to the Delba Tridalaka, which is the green. And this is found in Galway, but also in across the Shannon in North Tipperary and Tibor has produced. He very kindly put it on open source and made it available to the citizen science community. And he's published he's used some of the work of Bart Jasky from Trinity College, who published the written genealogies. So he's gone one step further and mapped the written genealogies with the 10,000 big Y DNA results. This is an example of the O'Briens, and this one is the Connachta tree, which maps to a lot of the surnames in Donegal and also in Mayo and Sligo. Right. So how did AI help us there? Well, there's huge amounts of data to be processed here, both in terms of written data, and large language models are very, very helpful in going through all of the written. Many of the ancient genealogies are in the public domain, like the O'Hart pedigrees, the O'Clery genealogies. There are about 20 major sources. One of the largest is the Great Book of genealogies, which is in 5 major volumes. And so the ultimate job will be to go through all of these ancient genealogies, ingest them into a language model and map them to the existing surnames. So we do have a spreadsheet with extensive data on it. So that will be, I suppose, the next step. So this is another case of traditional genealogy. This is one of my great grandmother, who was on the maternal line. So this is from Dunmore in County Galway. It's the story of Bridget Nolan Fox and her descendants. Bridget Nolan was known as Bid Nellie. She was the daughter of Ellen or Nellie Geraghty. Nellie Geraghty was my direct maternal great grandmother. And she married Thomas Fox in Kilnalapa in Dunmore in 1885. And, you know, this was a very difficult period. In Ireland, 9 of their 11 children emigrated to America. Bridget stayed back until the final 3 emigrated, and she emigrated with them. And they settled first in Cincinnati in Ohio, and later in Los Angeles. Bridget, that was between 1885 and 1899. Bridget arrived in 1899 at the age of 60, which is very unusual. And she was accompanied by the remaining daughters, Anna and Nora, and the son Andrew. And she lived with her family. She moved around amongst all of the families. They'd settled in California, and her many grandchildren, and she died in California in 1918. She was buried in Cavalry Cemetery. All of the children did very well in California. At least 3 of them became, or they or their spouses became mayors of the respective cities in which they settled. Nora Nolan married Herman Michel, and they established the largest independent dairy in Southern California, in Santa Monica. Anne Nolan married Thomas Phelan, and their granddaughter, Regina Phelan, was very inspired by the stories of their migration, because they traveled by all means of transport, including the original pioneer trails across Death Valley, on the trains which had recently been established, the Great Pacific Trains, by the horse wagons, some of them by not the Panama Canal, but they would go to the Panama and cross by mule, and then take another boat up to California, and so on and so forth. So a very adventurous period. And Regina used these family histories, and she wrote the history of California for the younger reader, which were sort of the bestseller of the time for young people in school. So again, I've used the I have a large corpus of data to go with, a lot of written material from Regina, but also from Regina's sister, Catherine Phelan, who had written a small booklet, I was able to take all of this data, update it, use modern genealogy techniques to build out family trees. Again, I use the AI of MyHeritage to go from 300 people on the tree to 1,500 people. And it was relatively easy. And I still have a big backlog of smart matches to process. So this tree is becoming bigger and bigger each day. And again, what I've tried to do is to imagine this in a story, and I'm using DALL-E and ChatGPT to do that. I've used extracts from Regina's books, and these are some of the books which she produced. One was about the history of Alta California. Another was about the El Camino Trail, the history of the Spanish and the Mexican California, and the wars which happened, and the travel route via Panama and all of the adventures they experienced doing that. The people who came with the original trains, and they came overland on the wagon trains and across the deserts and across the Oregon Trail. So although in traditional genealogy, I wouldn't be able to find these stories because Regina wrote them down and she based them on the experience of her ancestors. This was a valuable product for me to be able to make this story. So the future of genealogy, I think it'll be integrating text, image, and genomic data. I've tested with over 10 companies, and each of those, you have a lot of data. You've gigabytes of DNA data, but you also have genealogical data. You're matching people. And to date, I haven't really processed all of this data because it's almost overwhelming. But the large language models allow you to do that now, and that will be the next step, which will be using all of the data available on the platforms, and then using any other corresponding data, for example, the written family histories and so on. So I think we are living in a time of exponential growth in technology. It's almost doubling every year. We can see that by the vast sums which are being invested in these platforms. And I think that one of the applications will be this AI-driven storytelling to preserve the community heritage. What I've done so far is really using the animated still images. The next step, which is available, has become available this month, is to be able to do the animated moving images. So that's a